Okay, so I'm Brian from Delos, and this is Karen, and we're really I think it's just so cool to be here tonight with you guys and be able to share our love of sailing. And just a massive thank you for coming tonight and wanting to share this awesome journey with us and to set everything up. It really means a lot to us and give us the invitation, and I just think it's really cool. So in New Zealand, there's a saying that's kind of like kia ora, and it's a Maori saying. It's Polynesian in origin, but it basically means like welcome and be well and be healthy at the same time. And I used a little bit of Google Translate here, so I don't know how I got to that, but you know, there we go. So I'm originally from nowhere near the ocean. In fact, I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is in the middle of the American Southwest. No sailing in my family, no nothing. So I think what I'm going to do today is tell you a little bit about the history of how the trip got started and our dream and planning it, and then about the voyage we've done so far. And then we've picked a couple of topics that we think are pretty cool. But it's really informal, so if you guys have a question, just raise your hand. Don't worry if we're in the middle of a sentence or anything. It doesn't matter. We'd love to kind of make it real engaging. So questions are good. And tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Karen, born and raised in Sweden. It's really nice to be here. I hadn't sailed before at all, before I met Brian 4 years ago. So, yeah, that's me.
All right, on with the presentation. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the time. I call it the time of BS, but it's not really what you're thinking. It's what I refer to as before sailing. So this is me. Sometimes I look at this picture and I don't really even remember being that person. I was this guy, running a software consulting company, and I was working 70 hours a week, and I think my priorities were just a lot different. I had a house in the suburbs, and I had cars, and I just really wasn't, I was making good money, but I felt like there was something lacking or missing from my life. I didn't feel complete. And one day I heard this, and it really kind of affected me. You'll never look back and wish you'd worked more. And I wish I remember who had told me that, but it was somebody, very obviously very wise. But started, you'll never be on your deathbed and think back and like, oh man, I wish I had not taken that weekend off to spend time with my friends and family, or I wish I had worked, another 30 hours of overtime to make another few $1,000s. So when I heard that, I began thinking like, maybe there's something more I can do, something better to kind of like just enjoy life, instead of just basically, everything I was doing was targeted towards work, but start living a little bit more. And one day, I was pretty much bitten by the cruising bug. I was in the library and I saw this book, and it was just the picture of an ocean, and it said how to cross the ocean on your own boat. And I was just, no way, like, is that, people even still do that? I had no idea. I was very unaware of the sailing world, that people could actually take their own boats across oceans, and the whole thing just kind of fascinated me, and I really became addicted to the idea of sailing and cruising. And I started reading blogs and watching YouTube videos, and I started looking at Cruising World and reading books, and like everything I could get my hands on, I was just, consuming it, and it just basically took over me. So of course, if you're going to go sailing, you kind of need to come up with a plan. And the plan, this is a picture of some of the money that we've managed to use on the trip. My favorite one is the Cook Islands right here, because it's actually got a topless mermaid riding a dolphin, which I think is pretty cool to have on your money. But yeah, so I started from the research that I'd done in the books. I started making a plan, and I basically told myself, okay, I was 20, I think I was 28 at the time. And I said, okay, I want to go sailing 4 years from now. So I started figuring out what type of money I would need to make that happen, like where I would go, what that even actually meant. I mean, I had no idea where you would sail or why you would go there or any of the routes that people go or, you know, what kind of boat do you need at the time to cross an ocean. And I actually had a boat because my brother came visiting one time, and I was living in Seattle at the time doing my consulting thing, and he said, hey, bro, you live on a lake, why don't you have a boat? And I said, oh, you know, that's a great idea. I knew nothing about boats. And he looked this boat up on Boat Trader online, and it was just a couple streets down from my house, and I went and looked at it, and I was like, oh, it's a sailboat. You know, I had no, it was on a trailer. I knew absolutely nothing, and luckily the people, I just said, oh, let's do it. So it was a couple $1,000s, and bought it, hooked it up to the back of my Toyota 4Runner, and rolled down to the lake. And luckily the owners came with me to help me put up the mast and stuff, because I really, you know, was pretty clueless. But I ended up sailing this boat around Seattle, the lakes there, for about 4 years, almost 5 years, and just doing all sorts of stupid things. Like, I think the first thing I remember doing is, you know, I didn't realize why the other boats were going around. And I said, oh, there's a shortcut there, you know, I could. So I went straight and immediately grounded myself right in front of this massive, you know, these massive multi-millionaire houses on Lake Washington with these very posh people eating dinner in there. And then I run my sailboat up onto the beach, and, you know, we're trying to crank, because it's swing keel, so trying to crank the keel up and put the sails up and get off, you know, before we crash into their house. So that's, you know, but it was good because it's a good boat to learn on. It's much better I do that than on the boat I ended up sailing with. So, you know, if you're looking for a boat, this might actually, you might have seen this. Has anybody looked at this site, Yacht World? Yeah, I think I spent a lot of time on this site, and also talking to yacht brokers, and going and looking at boat shows, and pretty much just doing that for about 2.5 years. And then I went to a cruising seminar in Seattle, and they kind of had the boats listed, like what were good quality, yet still somewhat affordable cruising boats that were capable of going around the world. And I just started researching all of them. And Amel starts with an A, so it was very much at the top of the list. And I started looking more into the design philosophy, and, you know, how in love the owners were with the boats. And I really just fell in love with it. And I was about to fly to Florida to go look at one, because there was none on the west coast of the US. And then one came up for sale, just a few hours drive from Seattle. I went up to take a look, and I just stepped aboard, and I was like, I know this is the boat for me. The only problem is I couldn't afford it. So it was way out of my budget. So this is Delos. She's an Amel Super Maramu 53-foot, year 2000, built in La Rochelle, France. And, you know, when I saw this boat, I just felt like this is the boat I really want. But, you know, I could probably have sold everything and stretched out and bought the boat, but then I would have had absolutely no money to go cruising. I would have had to work for a few more years, and I didn't want to do that. Other option was, okay, buy a lesser boat, buy something that's a little less expensive, use the rest of the money to go cruising for a couple years. And then the third option, because the economy in the US still hadn't crashed and money was flowing like cheap wine at the time, was to get a marine mortgage. And I said, to hell with it, I'll get the marine mortgage and, you know, get a 20-year loan on it. It was like the same interest rate as my house, low payments, and then I had enough money to go cruising with, I thought, for maybe like 24 months, 2 years. I figured, 2 years is so long. You know, that's long, that's all I need, 2 years, perfect. So I did it, got the boat. This is our downwind sail arrangement, by the way. This is 2 poles straight out, 2 head sails, drop the main, drop the mizzen, and just run dead downwind, sun on your back. It's just, we did this for like 5 days on the way to the Marquesas without having to trim anything. It's just, you know, there's nothing like sailing like this, and it's a super rig for that. So I got the boat. I moved out of my house, sold all my furniture, everything I owned, just got rid of it all, put it up on, there's a site in the US called Craigslist, and it's like an eBay but local, I guess. Sold everything, took 1 carload of stuff from a 3-bedroom house and moved aboard the boat and ended up living on Delos for about a year, just over a year. Just getting used to the idea of living on the water instead of in a house, and taking short sails and week-long sails, and eventually ended up that time with a month-long kind of shakedown cruise up into the Canadian Gulf Islands. And then it was, you know, I had quit my job, had my 24 months of money, and did the big turn south. So left Seattle, sailed down the coast of California, which is kind of known at being a really gnarly, nasty stretch of water. I had a bunch of guys from on the boat that were like real experienced sailors, and we turned the corner, it was like 3 knots for the whole entire trip. And we spent 5 days motoring in flat seas, and pulled into San Francisco, went to dock the boat, put her in reverse, and there's this loud chunk, and the boat doesn't slow down, and we just smashed right into the dock. And I was thinking, okay, if that's the worst thing that happened so far, like, I'll take it. But yeah, the prop nut had come loose. Apparently, I did all my own work, and I hauled out, and it's an auto prop, and I didn't correctly use the right type of lock nut on the fasteners. So at some point down the trip, the prop nut had fallen off, and the only thing holding the prop on was the fact that we were in gear the whole time. And the second I put it in reverse, boop. It took 3 days of diving to find it, but we did, because it's like a 10,000 euro prop or something. I didn't want to buy a new one. So yeah, I was real nervous, because that was my first offshore passage of me. You know, it was me as a skipper in command of my own boat, I guess, and it was good. And we got the boat down to Mexico, and we hung out there for about 6 months, and that's where my brother Brady joined on the trip. And here he decided to do a sun tattoo. So he put on no sunscreen, put tape on his chest, went and laid out all day, and then at the end of the day we ripped the tape off. And yeah, it worked pretty good. I don't know if it was the best idea ever, but we were having a lot of fun with it. We basically hung out in Mexico for about 6 months, and we decided it's time to sail to the South Pacific. So we provisioned the boat. We left, sailed across the Pacific. First passage there was about 3,200 miles. Took us 18 days and a few hours. Awesome trip. Went through Marquesas, Tuamotu, Societies, Cook Islands, and then we ended up the season in New Zealand, because the South Pacific cyclone season comes on, and you basically have from April until November, sometimes December, to get out of Dodge. So we headed to New Zealand. It was, since leaving Seattle, it had been 14 months of cruising. We covered almost 11,000 nautical miles during that time, so it was a lot of moving. And 23 islands, I think, seven different countries in between, but it was awesome, and I loved it. And you know, by the time we got to New Zealand, it had been, you know, the initial 14 months. We spent 6 months in New Zealand. So right now, I've only made it to New Zealand. I'm 20 months into my 24 months of money, and I'm like, oh man, I am not ready to stop. So, you know, what do I do? So me and my brother decided to make this plan after exploring New Zealand, that it's a cool place to explore. We got a car, you know, we road tripped around, just spectacular. We met a couple of other guys there, because we were doing some work on super yachts, like day work, to try and put together a little bit of extra cash. So we thought maybe if we really, really skimp it, we can get enough to sail to Australia. So then the goal was like, okay, let's just get to Australia, and then we'll figure everything out then. So along the way in New Zealand is when I met Karen.
That's when I came into the picture. And Brian just asked me if I wanted to come and sail for the weekend, and I kind of never left. So I was studying in Melbourne at the time in Australia, and was kind of on a mini holiday in New Zealand with a few of my friends. And I happened to walk into the Mexican restaurant that Brady was working in. And we got invited to this boat party that night, and that's when I met Brian.
She thought I was a drug dealer.
A little bit. So we went sailing that weekend, and I was totally hooked. I just loved every part of it. And at the time, though, I had to fly back to finish my studies, which I did. 2 years later, I was finished. But when I was studying, I really, really wanted to spend more time on the boat and, of course, meet Brian a little bit. So I flew out when they were in Fiji. I flew out to see them, and we sailed to Vanuatu, and kind of as soon as I had a few weeks off, that was what my high priority was. And for about 2 years now, I've been on the boat full time. So it's, I don't know, sailing for me has become like extremely big. I've never sailed before. I met Brian, and it's kind of, I can't imagine doing anything else now. And I love all of it. And so I think back, and like craving burritos was a very good thing for me.
And obviously, I was stoked because I really liked Karen a lot, and it's nice. I think having girls on a boat is a good thing. She's a real good sailor, and she's not afraid to get her hands dirty, like picking up the filleting of the fish. This is a nice tuna that we caught off the coast of Australia when we were still on the land where there's some fish. So we thought maybe we have enough money to do the next leg, which was going to take us from New Zealand through Vanuatu and the Solomons, or Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomons, and into Australia. And we were planning on taking like 6 or 7 months to do it. So we left, and it was myself, Brady, and 2 other guys that we took along to kind of help us pay for the trip, just so that we could share costs of fuel and food and all that stuff. And then we met Yosha in Fiji, and my brother pulled the same trick on her. He's like, hey, do you want to come sailing for the weekend? That seems to work out for the Troutman brothers. And then she's never kind of left, and we ended up taking off and sailing through all these amazing islands. And this is a volcano in Tana in southern Vanuatu. Just real cool experiences. The whole area is just like what you would expect on national. This is me dancing with the Nambas, who they just wrap a banana leaf around their penis, and that's all they wear. This is some kids that we had a Michael Jackson dance party on the boat with in the Santa Cruz Islands. And they had never seen an iPod before. We showed them that, and it just blew their minds. And this is a wrecked cruise ship that we just came around the corner and said, is that a wrecked cruise ship over there? And just random things. But yeah, we continued sailing on. Had a fantastic time. Karen flew out and met us in Fiji, and then met us in the Solomon Islands, and did the sail back to Australia. And then when we got to Australia, this is how we looked. So my brother had gone from that to that, and I had gone from this awkward software guy to like some Robinson Crusoe, long-haired, fishing, bearded character. So this is how we arrived in Australia, and yeah, it was good. But and here we were completely out of money, so our options were pretty limited. I could maybe sell the boat. Really didn't want to do that, but I really thought about it. But then if you're in Australia, you sail the boat, you have to pay duty, and I was looking at how much money that would cost. And then I thought, oh, maybe I can go back to work, because I had been off work for 2 years, and the thought of working again really didn't sound all that bad at that point. So I got back with my company in the U.S. that I worked for, and was able to work out a deal where I worked remotely. And so we worked in Australia. We were there in total about 18 months, and about a year of that, I was able to work remotely doing some software development stuff. And Karen was finishing up university, and Yasha was in New Zealand working. My brother was doing super yacht things and rolling more burritos to make money, and we got cashed back up again for another season, and left Australia and headed up the coast around to Darwin, and then headed north to Indonesia. These are some kids that we saw in Ternate in Indonesia. This is a nice little private beach that we happened upon and spent. This is one fish that we happened to catch in Asia. They got eaten by a shark, and this is the Philippines. And I think we're sailing the Tubataha Reef here in the middle of the Sulu Sea. And more Philippines. You can see how many people they fit on a scooter there. It's insane. But yeah, we ended up in Indonesia. We were going to stay in the Philippines for 2 months and ended up spending like 8 months there. Just loved it. We stayed there so long that we totally messed up the monsoon, so we were beating into it on the way there. We were going to catch the winds behind us, but we stayed so long that the monsoons changed again, and so we were beating into it on the way back, which was not ideal, but we made it work. And we ended up in the northern tip of Borneo, which is just where Delos is right now. And so that's kind of the short version of the last 6 years of what we've been up to. Next, our plan when we're going back in December is to kind of do this, go from Borneo through the Malacca Straits, hit Sri Lanka, Maldives, come down through Mauritius, and then bump back up over the top of Madagascar, and then end up in South Africa. And if everything goes close to plan, we should be there about this time, or maybe November, December, something like that next year. I think it's another 10,000 miles of sailing. So we're really excited. It's going to be another awesome year of sailing. So pumped for that. So we had a few topics that we kind of wanted to cover. We hope that, I think you'll find them fun. We tried to bring some video of Brady and Yosha since they couldn't be here. They actually just arrived into New Zealand yesterday. They're sailing around a 100-foot swan right now, so they're off making money to come back and do some more sailing. So we're going to talk a little bit about our perspective on what it's like to live in close quarters with so many people on the boat. So.